The day I discovered my own son had stolen my gym contract, I realized betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from family. Richard Flores, 55, sat in the manager's office of Iron Legacy Fitness, the gym he had built from scratch. Sunlight filtered through the large windows, glinting off the chrome dumbbells and polished floors, but Richard didn't notice. He felt a pit in his stomach. For 25 years, this gym had been more than a business. It had been his life. Every sweat-stained mat, every worn-out treadmill, every echoing clang of free weights carried a memory, a sacrifice, a story of his relentless dedication. Richard's mornings had started at 4 a.m., jogging through Spokane before opening the gym. He had taught himself to lift heavy, design workout plans, and build a loyal community of clients who trusted him not just for their fitness, but for their guidance through life. And yet, at this moment, he felt like a stranger in his own empire. It started small. A few discrepancies in the accounts, a couple of clients mentioning new fees. Richard initially dismissed it as an administrative error, but deep down, his instinct screamed that something was wrong. Ethan would never do this, would he? Richard's son, Ethan, 28, had been involved in the gym since his teenage years. Once the apple of his eye, now he seemed distant, aloof, more interested in suits and business cards than in dumbbells and kettlebells. His wife, Lena, whispered ideas in his ear, plans to modernize the gym, expand the business. Richard had been cautious, always reminding them that expansion required trust and integrity, but it seemed they had other plans. Then came the night that changed everything. Richard had stayed late to finish paperwork and inventory checks. As he reached for the ownership folder, a worn leather binder with every document, contract, and license, he noticed it was missing. His heart stopped. He searched frantically, lifting files, checking drawers, but the folder was gone. Panic clawed at him. How could this happen? Then his phone buzzed. An email notification. The sender, City Board of Spokane. Congratulations, Ethan Flores. Sole ownership of Iron Legacy Fitness has been granted to you. Richard felt the floor tilt beneath him. He sank into the chair, hands shaking. His own son, his own flesh and blood, had legally taken the gym from him? He remembered the countless nights he had stayed awake, worrying about rent, utilities, and staff salaries, while Ethan had spent his weekends in expensive bars and parties with Lena by his side. I had trained him every lift, every push-up, every step, but the hardest lesson I hadn't taught him was respect. For me, for our sacrifices, for family. Richard couldn't sleep that night. Images of Ethan signing documents with a smug smile haunted him. He replayed every conversation, every argument. Did he ever respect me? Or was I always just a stepping stone to his dreams? The next morning, he walked through the gym, pretending nothing was wrong. Members greeted him, unaware of the storm brewing inside. He observed Ethan supervising the staff, barking orders, his tone sharp and unrecognizable. Lena was there documenting every corner with her phone, planning social media posts about the new era of Iron Legacy Fitness. Richard felt a surge of anger and despair. He remembered a moment from Ethan's childhood, 5-year-old Ethan struggling with a pull-up. Richard had lifted him gently, encouraging him. You've got this, son. One more try. And now, decades later, that same son had pushed him out, replacing trust and love with betrayal and ambition.
Richard realized something. This wasn't just a business dispute. This was personal. Every investment, every late-night sacrifice, every penny spent was now a tool for his own son to elevate himself. The betrayal stung deeper than any dumbbell could weigh, and I knew that taking the high road would only leave me powerless. But I was not done yet, not by a long shot. Determined, Richard sat down and started reviewing the contracts Ethan had signed. His fatherly instincts combined with his legal research gave him hope. There had to be a loophole. There had to be something, any mistake Ethan or Lena had made that would allow him to reclaim his gym. He called his lawyer friend Mark, explaining the situation. Mark's reaction was a mixture of shock and admiration. "Richard, this is brutal. They used every legal trick to take you out, but there's one clause they overlooked, your initial founder's guarantee. If we act fast, we might have a chance." Richard felt a flicker of hope, but he knew one thing: confronting Ethan directly could backfire. This wasn't just about law. It was about proving a point, teaching his son that betrayal has consequences. I could see him now, Ethan, smug and confident, thinking he had won. Little did he know, I was planning the most unforgettable lesson of his life. Richard made a silent vow. He would reclaim what was his, not just for the gym, but for respect, pride, and justice. This wasn't revenge for money. It was revenge for betrayal, for disrespect, for the years he had poured into someone who now spat on his legacy. And as he looked around the gym, the machines gleaming under fluorescent lights, he whispered, "You may have stolen my gym, Ethan, but you will never steal my dignity."
I could see Ethan laughing behind his phone screen, thinking he was untouchable. Little did he know I had already started the fire that would consume him. The next day, Richard stayed after closing hours, reviewing bank statements, membership forms, and email chains. Hours turned into a blur of numbers, dates, and suspicious signatures. Each discovery added fuel to his growing sense of betrayal. Ethan's greed wasn't subtle. He had created fake invoices, altered contracts, and even tried to intimidate loyal clients into leaving unless they followed his new pricing scheme. Richard clenched his fists, remembering the boy who had once struggled to lift 20 pounds, but had smiled so brightly when he finally succeeded. That boy was gone, replaced by a man who had weaponized his father's trust and generosity. He realized he needed a plan, not just to reclaim the gym legally, but to confront Ethan in a way that would make the lesson unforgettable. He began drafting letters, screenshots, and financial reports, building a detailed dossier of Ethan's misdeeds. Ethan had no idea that his father, the man he thought he could outsmart, had been plotting every move in silence. Richard remembered the day he had first walked Ethan through the deadlift. "It's all about form, focus, and respect," he had said. Now he realized that those lessons weren't just about lifting. They were about life. Respect had to be earned, not stolen, and Ethan had crossed the line. By nightfall, Richard had assembled a thick folder of evidence, emails detailing unauthorized charges, screenshots of social media boasting, and client statements confirming Ethan's manipulations. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about showing Ethan that betrayal has consequences. The chapter closes with Richard sitting in the dark office, the gym empty, his eyes fixed on the folder. He whispered to himself, "Tomorrow, Ethan will learn that no legacy can survive betrayal, especially from your own blood." I caught him red-handed, but not in the way I ever imagined. The morning sun barely penetrated the dense fog of the city streets as Richard drove to Iron Legacy Fitness. The gym had always been a sanctuary, a place where effort was rewarded and sweat meant progress. But today it felt like a war zone. Every instinct told him to be cautious. Ethan wasn't just reckless, he was calculating, and Richard had begun to realize that a lifetime of trust had been weaponized against him. Richard parked outside the gym, eyes scanning the facade. A grand reopening banner fluttered in the wind, emblazoned with Ethan's name. Grand reopening? Richard scoffed. The gym had never closed. It was merely a staged spectacle to flaunt authority, to announce control over a legacy Richard had built from scratch. Inside, the gym buzzed with activity. Clients were bustling, trainers hustling, and yet there was a strange tension in the air. Richard moved silently, unnoticed, observing Ethan from a distance. He watched as Ethan walked through the floor, speaking in a tone far too familiar for someone who wasn't supposed to be in charge yet, but somehow controlled the entire environment. Richard's suspicion intensified. He wandered past the free weights section, spotting a stack of papers on a trainer's desk. Curiosity piqued. He quietly rifled through them. Among the workout plans and client schedules, he found invoices with his signature forged, receipts altered, and membership payments redirected. Each line of text screamed betrayal. He remembered the countless nights he had stayed late at the gym, personally reconciling accounts and ensuring that the business ran smoothly. Ethan had taken that trust and turned it into a weapon, siphoning money from clients who trusted their father's judgment. The magnitude of deception hit Richard like a punch to the chest. Determined to gather undeniable proof, he slipped his phone out and began recording discreetly. Every action Ethan took, the way he manipulated staff, dismissed loyal clients, and flaunted his authority, was now immortalized in video and audio. He felt a grim satisfaction. If confrontation became necessary, he would have no doubt who was at fault.
He thought I was blind. He thought I trusted him blindly. But I had been watching, and soon he would pay. Richard made his way to the back office, where he knew the financial ledgers were kept. The moment he stepped inside, he noticed Ethan's phone lying face down on the desk. On a whim, Richard flipped it open. Emails between Ethan and an unknown investor detailed plans to open a competing gym branch, using Richard's client lists and proprietary workout methods. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach. This wasn't just greed, it was calculated sabotage. Ethan had turned the father-son bond into a transactional trap, leveraging every piece of knowledge Richard had imparted over the years to benefit himself. The betrayal was deep, and the humiliation of seeing it laid bare was even deeper. Richard began crafting a plan. He didn't want a petty argument or a heated confrontation. No. He wanted a lesson Ethan would remember forever, one that would reveal the consequences of greed, deceit, and disrespect. I realized then that the gym wasn't just a place of sweat and effort. It was the battlefield where a father's wrath would finally meet his son's arrogance. He spent the next few hours mapping out every interaction, every financial discrepancy, and every unethical move Ethan had made. He contacted Mark, the lawyer, whispering across the phone. "We're going to need subpoenas, client statements, and a full financial audit. Ethan has gone too far this time." Mark's calm voice reminded him, "Gather it quietly. Any slip-up and he'll cover his tracks. Make sure everything is documented beyond doubt." Richard walked through the gym, pretending to greet clients casually. Inside, he was a storm contained in a human frame. His eyes scanned every trainer, every member, every conversation. It all felt orchestrated, a show designed by Ethan to make Richard appear powerless. And Richard knew that appearances could be deceiving. By afternoon, he had assembled a private folder on his laptop. Emails, videos, screenshots, client statements, and bank discrepancies. Each piece of evidence painted a clear picture. Ethan's betrayal wasn't accidental. It was methodical. I had proof, but I needed the perfect moment, when the entire gym would see the son for what he truly was. As evening approached, Richard noticed Ethan boasting to the staff about a new client acquisition. Richard took mental notes. The timing, the people present, the potential witnesses. Everything was aligning. He would confront Ethan, but not in private. No, this needed an audience, a moment that would strip away arrogance and leave only truth. He remembered teaching Ethan the fundamentals of respect, hard work, and integrity. Those lessons had been ignored, dismissed, and now weaponized. Richard's heart ached with the knowledge that a son he had once adored could betray him so thoroughly.
But beneath the hurt was a spark, an unshakable resolve to reclaim not just the gym, but the dignity and respect that Ethan had thrown aside. Richard spent the night preparing for the confrontation, meticulously organizing evidence, rehearsing his words, and envisioning the scenario. Tomorrow, he thought, Ethan would learn the hard truth. Blood doesn't excuse betrayal, and respect isn't inherited, it's earned. As he left the empty gym, the weight of the upcoming storm pressed down on him, yet for the first time in weeks, a sense of purpose surged through his veins. The betrayal was deep, but so was his determination. He thought he owned everything, but today I was taking back what was mine, and he would watch it crumble.
The next morning, Richard arrived at Iron Legacy Fitness before sunrise. The gym was silent, bathed in the soft orange glow of the early morning sun, and the faint scent of rubber mats and protein shake lingered in the air. Most of the staff hadn't arrived yet, and Ethan was nowhere to be seen, but Richard knew exactly where he would be: the front desk, rehearsing lies and fabricating authority for the moment he thought would never arrive: a reckoning. Richard's eyes scanned the empty gym, lingering on the mirrors that reflected his own determined expression back at him. This is it, he thought. Every betrayal, every deceit, every sleepless night spent building this legacy for a son who had thrown it away. Today, he would confront it all. He pulled out his laptop, opening a folder meticulously compiled the previous day. Emails, bank statements, screenshots, and client testimonials all lay ready. Each file was a testament to Ethan's greed and manipulation, but also a symbol of Richard's patience, precision, and resolve. Today wasn't about anger, it was about justice. And then I saw him, my own son, smirking behind the front desk, unaware that his empire of lies was about to collapse. Ethan strolled in with the confidence that was almost comical in the context of the chaos Richard had uncovered. He waved at staff, preened, and acted like the rightful owner, unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. His arrogance was almost tangible, a thick fog of entitlement that made Richard's blood boil. Richard walked up to the front desk, laptop in hand. "Morning, Ethan," he said calmly. Ethan froze, a fleeting flicker of recognition in his eyes, but he quickly masked it with the rehearsed smirk. "Morning, Dad. Here to see the new expansion plans?" Richard's fingers hovered over the laptop. Expansion plans? He opened the first document, a financial ledger showing diverted client payments, altered invoices, and unauthorized transactions. "Let's start with these. Care to explain why your name isn't on these payments, but the money clearly went into your account?" Ethan's face paled slightly, then hardened into defiance. "That's bookkeeping errors, nothing serious. I was trying to help the gym grow." Richard cut him off, pointing to another folder. "Help or steal? These emails with investors show you planning a competing gym using my client list and my methods. You turned my trust into a blueprint for your betrayal." He laughed at me, at the truth, at the fact that I had just caught him, but I wasn't done yet. Richard began projecting the evidence on the gym's big screen TV, one by one. Screenshots, transaction histories, video recordings of Ethan manipulating staff and clients. Gasps echoed through the gym as trainers began arriving, witnessing firsthand the son they had respected for years being unmasked as a fraud. Ethan stammered, his composure cracking. You don't understand." Richard leaned in, voice low but fierce. "No, Ethan, I understand perfectly. You use me, the gym, our clients, and the people who trusted this place as tools for your own gain. And now you're about to learn that trust and respect aren't inherited. They're earned, and when you betray it, you lose it forever." The staff began murmuring, their shock palpable. Clients who had just arrived for morning sessions stopped mid-stretch, drawn to the drama unfolding. Rich's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the exhilarating rush of finally standing up to betrayal that had festered for too long. And then he tried to run, like a child caught stealing cookies, but the entire gym was watching now. Ethan attempted to grab his phone, presumably to call for reinforcements or cover his lies. Richard's gaze locked on him, unblinking. "Don't even think about it," he warned. Staff members gathered, a mix of confusion, concern, and all on their faces. "He's been siphoning funds, lying to clients, and planning to open up a competing gym with our resources," Richard announced, voice echoing. The gym felt smaller now, every corner filled with tension, every reflection in the mirrors amplifying the drama. Ethan's attempts at excuses fell flat. Every lie, every flinch, every defensive gesture was met with indisputable evidence projected for all to see. The gym, which had once been a sanctuary of respect and growth, had become the courtroom where Ethan's arrogance would face judgment. Richard moved toward him slowly, deliberately. "You want to know why this hurts so much? Because I trusted you. I taught you everything I knew. And what did you do? You weaponized it against me. And then, with every eye on him, I delivered the final blow, one that would change Ethan forever." Richard turned to the staff and clients. "Everyone here sees what happens when greed trumps integrity. Ethan thought he could inherit respect without earning it, but respect isn't inherited. It's earned, and when you betray it, you lose it forever." Ethan looked around, the magnitude of his actions finally sinking in. Faces he had trusted, colleagues he had manipulated, now regarded him with disbelief and disdain. The gym, which had once been a sanctuary of respect and growth, had become the courtroom where Ethan's arrogance would face judgment. Richard closed his laptop. "The gym's finances will be audited. Ethan, you are suspended immediately pending further action. And believe me, justice will be served." As Ethan slumped, the weight of his betrayal hitting harder than any gym weight, Richard felt a surge of satisfaction, not from revenge, but from reclaiming control and restoring integrity. The gym, which had once been tainted by deceit, now stood as a testament to truth, resilience, and justice. Richard stepped back, taking a deep breath, letting the tension drain from his shoulders. For the first time in months, he felt peace. Today, he had faced betrayal head-on, and he had emerged not just victorious, but stronger. He thought walking away would erase his sins, but the walls of Iron Legacy were about to remind him that betrayal never goes unnoticed. The morning after the confrontation, Iron Legacy Fitness felt different. The usual clanging of weights and rhythmic hum of treadmills was muted, replaced by a nervous energy that pulsed through every corner of the gym. Staff members exchanged whispers as they prepared for the day, casting occasional glances toward the front desk where Ethan had once held the illusion of authority. Richard arrived early, as he always did, but today his stride carried a new confidence, a mixture of relief and determination. The laptop with all the incriminating evidence lay open on the reception counter, a silent reminder that accountability had a very real face. He glanced around the gym, noting the tension, the unease, and most importantly, the quiet anticipation. Everyone knew something monumental had occurred yesterday. Then came the first call that changed everything. A client, long-term and loyal, asking why Ethan's name was suddenly nowhere to be found. Richard picked up the phone. "Iron Legacy Fitness, this is Richard," he said calmly. The client, a well-known local athlete who had relied on the gym for years, hesitated before speaking. "Richard, I just noticed Ethan hasn't been scheduling sessions under my account. Is everything okay?" Richard smiled, though it carried no warmth. "Everything is fine. We're just making sure that the gym operates with transparency and integrity, something we've always promised our clients."
As he hung up, Richard realized the ripple effect was starting. Clients who had trusted Ethan blindly were now questioning his authority. Staff members who had followed Ethan's instructions without scrutiny were beginning to feel the weight of their misplaced loyalty. The fallout had begun.
Meanwhile, Ethan sat slouched in a corner of the empty lounge, staring at his phone, which had blown up overnight with messages from disgruntled clients, angry suppliers, and even his own friends who had unknowingly been dragged into his schemes. He looked small, a far cry from the smug, self-assured persona he had worn the day before. And then came the letter that would terrify him more than any confrontation ever could. A formal notice from the state's athletic commission arrived at the gym. Richard had contacted them discreetly the night before, reporting Ethan's misappropriation of client funds and unethical behavior. The letter detailed potential fines, a temporary suspension of Ethan's professional license, and the possibility of a full investigation. Ethan's hands trembled as he read it, the reality finally sinking in. Every lie he had told, every shortcut he had taken, was now backed by official scrutiny. Richard watched silently, a mixture of satisfaction and somber reflection in his eyes. Justice was unfolding, not in the heat of an argument, but in the quiet, methodical way it always does when truth is allowed to surface. Richard called a staff meeting, the gym buzzing with a tense energy. Trainers, administrative staff, and even a few long-term clients gathered around, their expressions a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Yesterday, you all witnessed the consequences of deception and greed. Today, we take steps to ensure that Iron Legacy Fitness is a place of honesty, integrity, and respect. Ethan will be suspended pending a full investigation, and all gym operations will be under strict review. Any staff member who was involved in misconduct must come forward now. The room was silent. For a moment, the air felt thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, one by one, people began to speak up, admitting mistakes, confessing to overlooked transgressions, and pledging loyalty to the gym's true vision. The atmosphere shifted, slowly but unmistakably, from fear to unity. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come, and it would shake everyone to their core. As the staff meeting concluded, Richard's assistant brought in a package. It was from a former client who had left the gym months ago under Ethan's influence. Inside were documents proving that Ethan had diverted significant sums of money into a personal account overseas, an act of betrayal that went far beyond petty theft. Richard held up the documents for everyone to see. This is why transparency matters. This is why accountability is non-negotiable. Ethan thought he could manipulate trust, hide in shadows, and escape consequences. But today, we all see the truth. The room erupted with murmurs and gasps. Some staff members looked at each other in disbelief. Clients who had been loyal to Ethan were horrified. Ethan, meanwhile, sank further into his chair, realizing that his empire of deceit had crumbled entirely. Richard moved closer, his voice steady but piercing. "Ethan, it's over. You have lost trust, respect, and control. And the only way forward is to accept responsibility and make amends, though the road will be long and uncertain." Ethan's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Richard turned back to the staff and clients. "Let this be a lesson," he said firmly. "Iron Legacy Fitness stands for integrity, for strength, and for honesty. Those who respect these values will find support, growth, and opportunity here. Those who betray them will face consequences, no matter how close to home it hits."
And in that moment, as Ethan realized everything he had lost, I knew the real work was just beginning, rebuilding the gym, restoring faith, and proving that true strength isn't just physical, it's moral. Over the following days, the gym began to heal. Clients returned, impressed by Richard's transparency and dedication. Trainers felt empowered, inspired to work in an environment where honesty mattered more than shortcuts. Ethan, now under investigation, found himself isolated, confronted daily by the tangible results of his greed. Richard worked tirelessly, often staying late to ensure every detail of the gym's operations was above reproach. He met with clients personally, reassuring them, rebuilding relationships, and cementing his vision of a gym where respect and integrity were non-negotiable. And through it all, Richard never lost sight of the personal toll. The betrayal of a son, the disruption of a business built from years of sweat and sacrifice had left scars, but also forged resilience. He had faced deceit, confrontation, and legal complications, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. He thought it could destroy me, but I was about to prove that real power doesn't come from intimidation, it comes from integrity. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Iron Legacy Fitness, glinting off the polished floors and chrome of the equipment. The gym, once a battleground of betrayal and deceit, now radiated energy, hope, and purpose. Trainers moved with a newfound confidence. Clients laughed as they pushed through their routines, and for the first time in weeks, the atmosphere felt genuinely alive. Richard arrived early, as always, but today he wasn't just opening the gym, he was reclaiming it. He strode past the rows of treadmills, elliptical machines, and weight benches, nodding to staff members who had stuck by him. Each nod carried a silent message. We survived, we persevered, and we were stronger for it. Then the unexpected happened. A phone call from Ethan, desperate, pleading, and ready to face consequences he had ignored for too long. Richard answered the call without hesitation. The voice on the other end was unsteady, trembling with fear and shame. "Richard, it's Ethan." The voice cracked. I need to talk. I've lost everything. Please, I want to make things right." Richard's expression was unreadable. He took a deep breath and said calmly, "You'll get your chance, but first you need to accept what you have done and understand the impact of your actions." Ethan's plea wasn't just about money or reputation. It was about the loss of trust, the relationships shattered by his greed, and the realization that shortcuts and manipulation never lead to true power. Richard knew that letting Ethan confront his mistakes head-on was part of the redemption process, for both the man and the gym. As Ethan arrived at the gym, he realized he was no longer in control. The place he once ruled with arrogance now thrived without him. Ethan walked in slowly, eyes scanning the space he once dominated. But the energy he had expected, the tension, the whispers, the fear, was gone. In its place was confidence, unity, and respect. Clients were working out under trainers who now had complete authority. Staff members who had once hesitated to speak were confidently guiding newcomers, and Richard stood at the center, calm and unwavering. "I see. The gym runs better without me," Ethan muttered, almost to himself. His face betrayed regret, embarrassment, and the weight of knowing how much he had lost.
Richard didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured toward a conference table where the evidence of Ethan's misdeeds was laid out: financial statements, testimonies from clients, and emails that documented every instance of deception. "Look at this," Richard said, voice steady. "This is everything. Every client you misled, every dollar you diverted, every moment of trust you broke. You'll answer for it all, but first, understand it." Ethan sank into the chair, shaking his head. I can't believe I let it go this far. I thought I was untouchable." "You weren't," Richard said firmly. "And now you have the chance to face the consequences, make amends, and perhaps salvage what little respect remains." Then came the moment that would shock everyone at Iron Legacy Fitness: Ethan's confession and the revelation of just how deep his betrayal ran. Ethan began to speak, voice wavering. I thought I could control everyone here. I thought I was smarter than everyone else. I siphoned client funds, manipulated trainers, and lied to staff and members. I even falsified records to cover my mistakes. I betrayed the very people who trusted me the most." The room was silent. Staff members exchanged stunned glances. Some felt anger, others felt disbelief. Clients who had come in for their workouts paused, listening to the confession. Richard watched, unflinching. He allowed Ethan to speak without interruption, letting the truth land fully. It was a hard moment, but it was necessary. Only by acknowledging the full scope of his misdeeds could Ethan begin to atone. "And now," Richard asked quietly, "what will you do?" I'll cooperate fully. I'll repay every cent. I'll apologize to every client, trainer, and staff member I hurt. I want to make this right," Ethan admitted, tears welling in his eyes. I nodded. "Redemption is possible, but it's earned, not given. You will have to work for it every single day, and you'll start by helping the gym recover financially and rebuilding trust with the clients you betrayed." And as the weeks went by, something extraordinary happened. The gym didn't just survive, it became stronger than ever. Ethan, under strict supervision, began assisting in operations, rectifying financial discrepancies, and personally apologizing to clients. Richard observed his progress cautiously, ensuring that accountability was never compromised. Trainers and staff members began to notice subtle changes: humility replacing arrogance, responsibility replacing carelessness, and genuine effort replacing selfishness. The gym began attracting new members, impressed by the story of integrity, accountability, and resilience. Social media buzzed with testimonials of a gym that didn't just focus on physical strength, but moral strength as well. Richard held workshops for staff on ethics in fitness management, emphasizing that trust and honesty were as critical as physical training. And in the final twist, as the holiday season approached, Richard received a surprise that reminded him why he never gave up: a personal note from a client that made all the struggles worth it. The note read, "Richard, I've been to many gyms in my life, but none taught me more than Iron Legacy. Your honesty, courage, and refusal to let deceit prevail have inspired me. Thank you for showing that true strength is moral as well as physical." Richard smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't experienced since the darkest days of betrayal. Ethan, now humbled and genuinely remorseful, was working diligently, aware that his redemption journey had only begun. Richard looked around the gym, seeing laughter, sweat, and camaraderie. He realized that despite the betrayal, the deception, and the months of struggle, Iron Legacy Fitness had emerged stronger, more respected, and more united than ever. And he understood the most important lesson: integrity, accountability, and resilience are the true marks of strength, far beyond any muscle or bicep curl.